Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Eddie Marcus, and I'm here again to talk about some issues that are pertinent to freedom, prosperity, and joy. When I speak about things as this, I naturally have to include in my conversation the highest power that I am familiar with or that I recognize, and that is the power of God. You know, when we think about God, when you think about the number of people who at one time or another think about God and how those thoughts are so different from one to the other, and how the conclusions of an interpretation of God is determined, and they are mind-blowing as far as their differences are concerned. And I say that they are these because most people in the knowledge of God is taught by someone. In other words, most people are taught about God. It might be from the parents, or the knowledge might come from Sunday school or going to church, or it might come from Sunday school books, or it might come from the Bible. Just hearing about God. Or it might come from a seminary or where you go to learn to be a minister or someone, an evangelist who is familiar with the given knowledge or perceived knowledge of God. Now that's one form, but there's another form where some people are taught by God. They literally are taught by the Spirit of God in their lives, one-on-one. And if you take this situation, you will find that their interpretation and their response to God and what it's all about is a little bit different than that which is taught about God by someone. For instance, if we remember the story of Paul in the Bible, Paul was a scholar. Paul was well educated, according to the story. And Paul was a defender of God. He was taught, here again, about God. And you couldn't find a more staunch supporter of God than Paul. But what Paul found out is that every commitment and dedication that he had, though it might have been genuine, it was wrong. It was corrupt. He was doing things in his effort to please God. He was doing things that were displeasing to God. He had his own understanding. That's what happens when you're taught about something, about someone, by someone. First of all, you get their prejudices in their teaching, and then you create your own. And so what you end up with is perhaps as fictitious as can be. But after Paul had an encounter with the Spirit of God, there was a new message. Now, when one might ask, well, if Paul was deceived by or misguided by the first message, what is to say that he was not misguided or misled by the second message? And I can give you the reason how you can determine the two. Paul's first education came with him having this desire to crucify and hurt and harm people in the name of God. But having an encounter with the Spirit, everything changed. He became a different person. He was not trying to persecute. He was not trying to kill or destroy, but was trying to bring life and love and compassion. That was the difference. And so when we talking about people who are out here in the world today, talking about God, these guys have not had an encounter with the Spirit. These guys and ladies and individuals have been taught about God. And the reason that all of the hell in the world continues to exist is because people don't know God. They do not know God. Oftentimes I think about Christ. I think about God's plan for the a multiplication of people on earth, men and women and sex and procreation and animals, male and female and procreation. I keep thinking about that. And I think about Lucifer, who's supposedly always trying to imitate and do his own thing. And I'm not saying this is so, but I've heard it thought, at least a thought founded on it, that is the basis for homosexuality. Men with men and women for women. They can't procreate. That's one thing about it. They cannot procreate. And even if they wanted to, they'd have to indulge with someone of the opposite persuasion. Or they could do it with someone of the same persuasion, gay male, gay female, go through an act to produce a child. But men with men and women with women cannot produce children. And people have referred to this as a satanic way, a Luciferian way, because it denies procreation. Other folks might say it might be God's plan to discontinue the growth of humankind on the earth because they failed in such a way. But then I would ask, as many ask, did God fail? Or did Jesus fail? These are questions that come to our mind. We say this because when the devil was kicked out of heaven, he did not change to flesh and bones. As practical as we can see it, it's spirit, as is God or Jesus, spirit. But when human beings came upon the earth, having been kicked out from the garden, they were open for choice. Before they had choice, but they followed a principle that allowed for peace and prosperity and joy. They followed the principle because it was like natural. No one was there trying out the other. There was no Lucifer there at the beginning. Or if it was, it took a moment for him to raise his ugly head and got busy. So when Adam and Eve stepped out of the garden, they stepped out absent the understanding of the Spirit of God and came out with a misguided directive from Lucifer: you shall not or will not surely die, that you will be like God, knowing good and evil, and all of this other kind of stuff you guys have heard about or read about. But when Adam and Eve came out under this influence of Satan, they were adaptive to that which Satan had brought to their enlightenment. And that basically was what it was like throughout the beginning of humankind. The reason being is that there were men who received, at least the book says, there were people who received knowledge of God, who received inspiration, who were giving out information, but they were basically just human men who had been given directives but had no authority to enlighten, such as the spirit of Satan had. And so this is a reason that Jesus came, to really give some foresight to God's message. And you could find none better than dying, being buried, and then rising up from the dead. I mean, you could find nothing more pure than that. But yet, the people on earth choose to follow the dictates of the spirit of Satan. And the things that they have built up are the substance of God Almighty, but it's being used in the way that the influence of Satan would have it used, rather than the influence of God. A house is a house, of course, and everyone should have a house. But according to the dictates of Satan, no. Only some should have a house. That props the ones up who have a house as being superior to the one who's homeless. And that's what Satan, the Luciferian, is all about, separating his elect from everybody else to glorify himself and those that glory in him, only at the expense of others. While God's saying everybody can be prosperous. But as the cartoon character once says, I mean, if all of us can run fast, then who's fast? Someone is fast only if someone else can run not so fast. So if everybody is at peace, then what is true peace? If everybody is prosperous, then what does it mean? To them who will prosper, somebody got to be poor. Otherwise, prosperity means nothing. Or if someone wants to be loved, if no one is hated, then what does love mean? Well, love means it's a place where you want to be at. And a hate means a place you don't want to be at. House means a place you want to be at. And homeless is a place you don't want to be at. And you understand? So when we think about how people have failed Christ's way of life and chose to glorify Satan's way of life, you know, it becomes mind-boggling. It makes one think about the Antichrist. Like, who could the Antichrist be? Well, first of all, the Antichrist is totally against and different than what we perceive Christ to be. And really, the Antichrist has the assistance of those who call themselves elite, the ones who are trying to choose someone who they feel will come into power and do exactly what their will, and that is the will of the elite, what they desire. But the Antichrist is bolder than that, slicker than that. He used the elite, the Illuminati, as a channel to be able to rise above everything else. But in reality, the Antichrist has no real allegiance to the elitists. He has no real allegiance to the Illuminati or the New World Order or Freemasonry or any of the secret societies. The Antichrist has been able to fool the powers that be. In reality, the Antichrist is one that is so low down and so dirty that to have his way or her way, they would actually push the button that would destroy the world without even thinking about it, just knowing that they will not have it any other way. So, when people start talking about the Antichrist and how the Antichrist is being successful in the world, I was thinking to myself, why is it that God got to come back? Christ got to come back. I mean, he's been here to show us how to rise above it. The devil has not one time has the book inferred that the devil took on human form and came up on earth to deceive people. Just the spirit, the influence. Christ took on human flesh, came to the world. And now we say Christ got to come back. Heaven has got to send somebody down here to overcome a spirit that we say we don't want. And yet that's the only thing we receive. And the spirit we say we want, we reject it. And so that which we have rejected has got to come back in the flesh to whoop upside the head and make us accept it. Woo! That's a strange thing. Well, stranger than fiction have happened. So until next time, I'll leave this with you. And you can dissect it, digest it, do it with as you will. Eddie Marcus. Bye-bye.